Dogs wait for instructions. Cats do not. Dogs evolved to cooperate with humans over thousands of years of selective partnership. Cats still behave like they are deciding whether humans deserve their attention at all. And that is strange. Because cats have lived beside humans for roughly 10,000 years. They sleep in our homes, eat our food, sit on our furniture, and yet, a house cat today still behaves remarkably similarly to its wild ancestors. It still stalks silently, still hunts instinctively, still attacks moving objects for no reason other than instinct, still behaves like a tiny predator living inside civilization. Scientists who study cat domestication have made a striking observation. Even today, experts often cannot reliably distinguish the skeleton of a domestic house cat from that of an African wildcat. That is how little cats have physically changed from their wild ancestors, despite thousands of years beside humans. And the deeper researchers studied cats, the stranger the story became. Because humans may not have truly domesticated cats at all. We may have simply created the perfect world for them to invade. And after spreading across the planet beside us, cats became so successful that they contributed to the extinction of dozens of species. This is that story. To understand what cats actually are, you have to understand what they are not. Dogs descend from wolves. Wolves are pack hunters. They live in social hierarchies. They depend on coordinated relationships. They evolved, over tens of thousands of years of life beside humans, to read human emotions, follow human cues, and orient their behavior around human approval. Dogs wanted leaders. They found humans, and a genuine partnership formed. Cats descend from the African wildcat, Felis sylvestris libica, a solitary, territorial, nocturnal hunter that roamed the Middle East long before any city existed. Solitary hunters do not form packs. They do not develop hierarchies. They do not depend on cooperative relationships to survive. They evolved to exploit opportunity. And that difference, between a species that wanted leaders and a species that wanted access, is the key to everything that followed. Even today, domestic cats maintain their ancestral independence in ways that are remarkable for an animal that has lived beside humans for 10 millennia. They largely ignore commands. They maintain active hunting instincts regardless of how well they are fed. They defend personal territory. They come and go on their own terms. Research published in the journal Science found that, unlike dogs, cats show very little of the genetic divergence from their wild ancestors that would indicate deep, human-directed domestication. Their genome remains extremely close to that of the African wildcat. Cats never became psychologically dependent on humans the way dogs did. That is not a limitation. It turned out to be a survival advantage. The story of how cats entered human civilization is not a story of deliberate choice. It is a story of an accident that changed the world. Around 10,000 years ago, in the region known as the Fertile Crescent, across what is now Iraq, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, humans made a world-changing transition. They stopped moving. They began farming. They built permanent settlements. And they started storing grain. Grain stores attracted rodents. The house mouse, a species native to the Indian subcontinent, found its way into human silos and thrived there. Rodent populations near early human settlements grew substantially, and rodents attracted cats. The African wildcats that lived across that landscape were efficient hunters of small rodents. When rodent populations concentrated around human settlements, some wildcats began approaching those settlements to hunt. Human civilization accidentally became the perfect ecosystem for a small, silent predator. The wildcats that were least fearful of humans, the ones that could tolerate proximity to people without panicking, had access to the most abundant food source in the region. They ate better. They survived more reliably. They reproduced more successfully. Over generations, the less fearful cats thrived. The more fearful ones did not approach and missed the food bonanza entirely. Humans, for their part, recognized the value of the arrangement. The cats killed the rodents that threatened their grain. The cats stayed. The relationship deepened. But nobody designed this. Nobody selected cats for domestication the way they selected cattle, horses, or dogs. Cats domesticated themselves. Gradually, on their own terms, drawn not by affection for humans, but by the extraordinary opportunity humans had unknowingly created. Every major domesticated animal underwent significant transformation from its wild ancestor. Wolves became dogs, deeply social, emotionally dependent, physically transformed. Aurochs became cattle, docile, entirely dependent on human management. Wild horses became cooperative mounts that humans could ride and direct. Cats? Scientists describe them as only semi-domesticated. Unlike almost every other domesticated species, cats made the transition into human life without their wild nature changing greatly. They became more tolerant of humans, yes. Less immediately aggressive, yes. But their core predatory identity remained almost untouched. Your house cat still stalks silently before pouncing, still watches moving objects with locked, predatory focus, still hunts and kills even when completely well-fed. Research from the University of Exeter confirmed that hunting behavior in domestic cats is driven by instinct, not hunger. Cats engage in what researchers call surplus killing, hunting and killing prey even when they have no nutritional need to do so. A cat that has just eaten a full meal will still hunt a bird or mouse if one crosses its path. The hunting drive and the hunger drive operate completely independently. And then there is what happens at midnight. The sudden sprinting through the house, the intense stalking of a toy, the ambush from behind furniture, the silent watching from elevated positions. These behaviors feel random to human observers. They are not random at all. They are the preserved behavioral repertoire of a solitary nocturnal predator who has not been told it no longer needs to hunt. Humans brought tiny apex predators into civilization and allowed them to sleep beside children. If this video is changing the way you think about cats, subscribe to Echora, because some of the strangest parts of civilization began with animals humans never fully understood. And tell me in the comments, do you think cats actually love humans, or simply learned how useful humans are? Here is where the story becomes something harder to sit with. As human civilization spread across the earth, cats went with it. On trading ships crossing the Mediterranean, on vessels sailing to newly settled islands, on colonial expeditions reaching continents and archipelagos that had never experienced a predator of this kind. Everywhere humans established themselves, cats followed. And everywhere cats arrived in new ecosystems, the same problem emerged. Many of the species in those ecosystems had evolved over millions of years without any small, stealthy, efficient mammalian predator like a cat. Island birds that had never needed to fly from a ground-level threat. Reptiles that had no instinct to flee from a silent, approaching predator. Small mammals that had no behavioral response to an animal that hunted the way cats hunt. A landmark study published in Nature Communications found that free-ranging cats in the United States alone kill between 1.4 and 3.7 billion birds and between 6.3 and 22.3 billion mammals annually. The International Union for Conservation of Nature lists domestic cats among the world's 100 worst invasive species. Globally, cats have contributed to the extinction of at least 63 species of birds, reptiles, and mammals. They are responsible for at least 14% of modern bird, mammal, and reptile extinctions on islands. There is no other single invasive mammal on Earth that has consumed as many different species as the domestic cat. One of the most striking cases is the Stevens Island wren, a small flightless bird from a tiny island off the coast of New Zealand. In 1894, a lighthouse keeper's cat discovered the species. Within months, it was extinct. An entire species, lost to science before it could even be properly studied, killed by a single cat. Humans did not just spread civilization across Earth. We spread cats with it. And many of the animals that had evolved on islands and in isolated ecosystems simply had no defense against a silent miniature predator that could fit under a bush and wait. And yet, despite all of this, the hunting, the independence, the refusal to be truly tamed, humans did not grow frustrated with cats. They became obsessed with them. In ancient Egypt, Cats began as practical tools. They protected grain stores from rodents. They controlled the rat and mouse populations that threatened the food supplies of an entire civilization. They reduced disease risk. But somewhere between the practical and the sacred, something shifted. By the time of the New Kingdom, around 1500 BCE, cats had become venerated animals in Egyptian society. The goddess Bastet, depicted with the head of a cat, became one of the most widely worshipped deities in the Egyptian pantheon. She was the goddess of home, fertility, protection, and music. Killing a cat in ancient Egypt, even accidentally, was punishable by death. Greek historian Diodorus Siculus recorded witnessing an Egyptian mob kill a Roman citizen who had accidentally killed a cat, despite the pharaoh's attempts to intervene and prevent it. Hundreds of thousands of mummified cats have been recovered from burial sites across Egypt, at Saqqara, at Bubastis, in chambers throughout the Nile Delta. Families who lost a cat would shave their eyebrows in mourning. Somewhere in history, humans stopped seeing cats as tools and started seeing them as something almost supernatural. It is not difficult to understand why. Cats were mysterious. They operated in the darkness. They moved without sound. They saw in conditions that were nearly blind to humans. They appeared and disappeared at will. And no matter how long humans lived beside them, cats never fully surrendered their secrets. Here is where the story takes one final unexpected turn. While humans were congratulating themselves on domesticating cats, cats may have been quietly domesticating humans. Dogs adapted themselves to fit into the human world. Cats adapted humans to fit into theirs. Consider what cats learned to do. The purr, the sound most associated with a content cat, operates at a frequency between 25 and 150 Hertz, a range that researchers have linked to promoting bone density and healing in humans. It is, coincidentally, deeply relaxing to most people. The meow is even more deliberate. Research has shown that adult cats meow almost exclusively at humans, not at other cats. It is a form of communication developed specifically for a human audience. And many cats have developed what researchers call a solicitation purr, a purr with a high-frequency cry embedded within it that mimics the frequency of a human infant's cry. Humans find it almost impossible to ignore. A cat that had mastered signaling hunger to a human, that had learned which behaviors produced food and warmth and affection, survived and reproduced better than a cat that had not. Over thousands of years, the cats that were most effective at managing their human companions passed those traits to their offspring. The cat did not need to surrender its independence to benefit from civilization. It needed only to know which buttons to press. After 10,000 years of cohabitation, cats remain among the least understood of all domestic animals. Scientists still debate whether cats experience attachment to individual humans in any meaningful way, or whether the bond is primarily maintained by resource association, food, warmth, shelter. Research on cat cognition has found that cats are aware of their owner's presence and absence in their environment. They display lower stress when familiar human scent is present. They develop individual preferences for specific humans, but they also show a striking indifference that no other domesticated animal quite replicates. Call a dog, it comes. Call a cat, it considers. Cats never fully surrendered their wildness. Their domestication produced an animal that is genuinely novel, capable of living intimately beside humans but never fully on human terms. Even inside modern homes, cats still behave like visitors from another version of nature. And maybe that is exactly why humans remain so fascinated by them after 10,000 years. Because cats are the one domestic animal that never stopped feeling slightly beyond human understanding. Thousands of years ago, wildcats moved toward human settlements for food. Humans welcomed them because they solved a problem. And slowly, one of the strangest relationships in the history of civilization began. But unlike dogs, cats never fully surrendered themselves to the human world. They kept their instincts, their independence, their mystery, their silence. And maybe that is why humans remain obsessed with them. Because cats still feel partly outside the human world, partly untamed. like tiny reminders that nature never completely disappeared from civilization. Maybe humans did not truly domesticate cats. Maybe we simply built a world they learned how to conquer quietly beside us. And somewhere inside every sleeping house cat, the ancient predator still exists. If this video changed the way you think about cats and civilization, subscribe to Echora, because next time we explore another strange part of human history that most people never stop to question. And tell me in the comments, do you think cats were ever truly domesticated at all? Subscribe to our channel for more science that makes you see the world differently.